Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Kathryn Andrews, and I'm the founder of an organization located in this building called the Judith Center. We just opened our space here this past summer. We are an art-centric nonprofit organization that produces programming around sexism in the United States with a specific lens on how when sexism occurs in one field, it impacts others. This programming includes talks, exhibitions, a book club, a poetry workshop series, and a lending library. We are thrilled to present this program here today entitled Beyond Violence in Wartime Photography in collaboration with Show LA, featuring a talk by the Ukrainian curator, Kateryna Radchenko, who we welcome here from Kiev. Thank you for joining us, Kateryna. Kateryna is an independent photography curator. She is the founder and director of Odessa Photo Days Festival and a fellow of the Magnum Foundation's Counter Histories program. Kateryna has curated exhibitions across Europe and beyond and has published widely on the subject of photography and is arguably perhaps the only curator in Ukraine. We can get into that. Kateryna will deliver a talk for roughly half an hour, and then we will open it up to a roundtable discussion where she'll be joined by Arpad Kovacs, Associate Curator in the Department of Photographs at the J. Paul Getty Museum, and Camilla de Maffei, a photographer and educator based in Milan and Barcelona, whose work is on view at Show LA now, and who has been working in the Balkans for 17 years, looking at conditions of post-war life. Before I pass the mic to Kateryna, I'd like to briefly speak about my hopes for this event. Last year in Bielefeld, Germany, I saw Kateryna deliver a lecture on the history of photography in Ukraine, which covered how the medium has been used as a tool for propaganda and later for cultural preservation. I was very moved by her talk. With so many wars going on around the globe, I began thinking about how photography might do something other than simply represent what's going on, which often tends to multiply our exposure to violence, collectively traumatizing us and normalizing violence's ongoing occurrence. So I began wondering, how could we reimagine the possibilities for war photography? Can photography under these conditions be a conduit for care and empathy, and not just simply a tool whereby the cycles of violence are reinforced? Part of my interest in this question also came from my experience with the LA fires last year. Thousands of people stepped up to support those in crisis here. There were jokes at the time that LA wouldn't be capable of that response, the narcissistic city that we are. But lo and behold, the Angelinas stepped up. Yet while I witnessed all of this effort, I also noticed its lack of representation in the media, which focused on the spectacle of devastation. It began to make me wonder what else is happening around the globe as we see images of fighting, bombing, and death. What are the other stories that are not being told during these times? And can we imagine photography's job as something other than what we have known it to be? Have we normalized seeing images of violence over and above representations of care, so much so that we fail to see care as a valuable weapon as well? With those questions, I will turn the mic over to Kateryna.
Thank you, Kathryn, for the first of all for the invitation. Did you hear me well? Okay, perfect. So I just would like to start from the few things to mention them, because during my stay in Los Angeles, I was asked. So the first things that, yes, I'm still living in Ukraine, and I came from Kiev, and what I wanted to share is the second, that yes, the life is still going on in Ukraine during the war. And I really wanted to share how the life looks like during the war, which is not possible to explain by the photography, but we'll just try a little bit to understand, a little bit come closer. And the third point that I don't want to disappoint you, but I will not show you the war images, because I think you can see them a lot in the media, in the newspaper, and you exactly from that images you know what's going on in Ukraine. But what I wanted to show, it's more personal reflections from the people, from the artists, from the photographers who is living in Ukraine now, and how they're using the media of photography to share their experience, but also to go through the traumatic experience. So let's start from the 2022. When the escalation happened in Ukraine, and important to say that the war starts in 2014, so it's already 10 years of the war. And in 2022, when the escalation happened, for all the photographers and artists in the one moment, in one day, became the war photographers, with no having any experience how to shoot in the conflict places, with no having any possibilities like how to get this knowledge, no practices this, with no equipment. Just like in this certain moment, you wake up in the country where the war escalated, and what you can to do, it's like to film it, to shoot it, to collect the information, to collect visual evidences, and to try to share it to the world. So everyone who stayed in Ukraine, they started to document this absolutely terrible, fast changes, which we are going through them during these 4 years. So, for example, this is the image of my friend and my colleague Maxim Finogeev from Odessa, from my hometown. And you can see that it says that it's forbidden to go to the beach because it's can be mines there. And this is the new reality. When you're spending all your life living by the beach, and you guys, you have to know this, you're living by the ocean. And when you're living by the beach and you know that you always have this access, you always can be on the beach to spend the night there with your friends, to enjoy it, and in a certain moment, it just became not possible. Even that you're living next to it, it's just dangerous. There are a lot of mines in the seaside, but also it could be the mines on the beaches, so it's just dangerous to be in your own place, in your own city. And this is image it's quite powerful for me, because it shows how radically the life changed. But also it says that we have to adapt it to the new reality. So by my short presentation, I would just like to show you different parts, different changes which we are having exactly in the photography, in the cultural life. So the first one, it's what I already mentioned briefly. This is a transition from the conceptual art of photography to the documentation. Because the important things that when you're working as a conceptual photographer or a conceptual artist, you need to have a time and space for the reflection. You need to have a really time to work on your ideas, to develop them. But this time, it should be quiet. This time when you're not in the danger. If you're in the danger, if you're all the time, 24 hours thinking about how to really go through this experience, how to survive, there's no chance to do the conceptual art. That's why photography changed. Because even that artist who did the conceptual photography, who did artistical works, they started to work on the documentation. So for example, here we have the artist Elena Subach. She is from the west part from Ukraine, from Lviv. So her works, it always was about the bright colors, a little bit surrealistic, a little bit eclectic. She tried to capture different stories by the combining and making collages. For example, this story about grandmothers, which she did in 2018. So she just figured out that in the west part of Ukraine, the grandmothers, the old females, having their own interesting life. They're gathering together, they really believe in the became super religion, they're having some rituals together. So Elena wanted just to capture these moments, but also to show this eclectic by the how they're dressed and the rituals which they're working on. And it's beautiful colors and it's collages, so it's manipulated works. But in 2022, she is doing just documentation of preservation of the culture heritage in Lviv. So what she is doing, she is like trying to just make the direct images with no manipulation, with no collages, just trying to show how the people in Lviv, volunteers, preserve the culture heritage around the city in the public spaces, but also in the museums, and trying to protect them if the Russians will come to the west part. So it's radically changed. She just like document the changes, and she is not trying to be involved in any manipulation or any artistical reflection on it. Recently, she did the project which called where? What the pictures are of. Yeah, this is the pictures. Yeah, this is exactly. This is, for example, the in the middle. It's covering the church, the old church. So, and it's covered by this metal construction, just like to protect if it will be the bomb attack. To be honest, it was in 2022 when we believed that it's possible. It's not possible. So, like nowadays, if the rocket comes, especially if ballistic, it will destroy this protection. But like in 2022, we were still naive, and also like the weapons were different. Or for example, you can see like the statues like in the public spaces. So it's also like covered by the constructions, and it was also believed that it will protect the monuments, which now it's not possible, to be honest. But anyway, so was like this documentation, how the people try to protect the statues, like the architecture, the houses, and the paintings in the museums, and like to hide it from the attack. Then like recently, she did the project which called Unbroken. So this is like she's worked with the soldiers and with the people who were like now in the rehabilitation, the people who lost their legs or hands. And this is the soldiers, but not all of them. Like it's also like the civilians who were like injured during the war. And we can see like how the rehabilitation works, like how the people like swimming in the pool, or for example like the different like I don't know, prostheses. How it's say in English? Yeah, prostheses. And but so like she back a little bit to this color topic. So she's back a little bit, like she's trying to capture the colors. So like this story is really very colorful. She's mixing the colors with the black and white, but still the way how she's doing is direct documentation with no like her artistical way of appropriate or like to make any manipulation. Because when you're living in the country where so many changes every day, every week, you're just trying to document all these changes for the history or maybe as evidences, and you believe that this documentation will help, first of all, like for the using maybe in the future these stories, to tell the stories outside of Ukraine, but also this is belief that this is way how we can memorize these changes, or really like to try to put in these images like something what is important for us, what can be destroyed as culture heritage or as people around us. So, but like what is interesting that like most of the artists, most of the photographers nowadays working only with the documentation. They didn't manage to back to the conceptual art, as I mentioned, because of the conditions of living. And but also because like there are so many changes, and like the people are really trying to capture them and to really document these changes. Like for example, this winter we had the most cold winter, and also like the winter was no electricity, and of course like most of the artists tried to reflect on this new terrible experience and try like to make the images of it. The second transition, which is important, is transition from the professional photography to the vernacular photography. So this transition, it's also like started to be really active from the 2022. And the reason for this, there's several reasons. So like the first one, it's that we can say that Ukrainian war is the most covered war by the photographers. I heard this statement. But still there's so many topics which are not covered by professional photographers or media. For example, we don't have the stories from the evacuated trains, because like nobody from the professional photographers can entered the evacuated trains, there was so full, so packed by the civilians that it was no chance for the photographer just to come inside for the making images. Or frontline. It's so dangerous to be on the front line in the special, like in the different positions. So of course, like it's not possible to get access there. And how do we know the stories what's going on the front line? Or so like usually these images we can get from the civilians or like from the absolutely not professional photographers. Like for example, this is the story from artist Anna Kisla. She is from Kherson. And Kherson was occupied, it's south part of Ukraine, and it was occupied in the beginning of 2022. So she stayed and she lived during the occupation time. During the occupation, it's really dangerous to make any images. If you'll be stopped by the Russian soldiers and they will check your phone and they will find anything that you are supporting Ukraine or like you have even image, I don't know, the colors black and yellow, or black, not black, blue, yeah, blue and yellow, if you even not a flag, but just like it's combined together, like it's can be enough to be killed. So like it's really like radical and really dangerous to make the images during the occupation. But still, Anna did these images, which I wanted to share with you. She did it on her phone. And this is like some self-reflections, which is like not really telling the story, but it gives like feelings, how is to live during the occupation. Because like she has captured, for example, the flowers, and we can see that it's springtime. She has captured this special Pascha, which we are using for the Easter, and we can see the dates. She is, for example, like the last one, which is like called Нет on Russian, it's mean no. And it's also kind of the personal reflection, or which we can see the fire, which probably happened during the explosions. So all these things together, it's gave us the story and like really understanding a little bit like one more step closer to understand what is the life during the occupation. Or for example, the second one, it's the shelves, completely empty shelves in the supermarket. And another thing which is important to mention that for people, for civilians who is trying to leave the occupied territories, the territories which are occupied by the Russian soldiers, and to move to the Ukrainian side, they have to pass several checkpoints. And during these checkpoints, all the phones will be checked. And again, if you have any photos, which is like saying that you're supporting Ukraine, you can be killed and not pass this checkpoint. Another case, or another example, again, how about like how we can get the information from the vernacular images. It's like the story of one young photographer, Kateryna Radchenko. When she did this story, she was only 19. So she's from Kremenchuk, and together with her mom, she moved to Poland, to Warsaw, where she's studying right now. And she was one of the part of our mentorship program for the teenagers. So, and then she did the story. She asked, like she found the people who flew from Ukraine during the beginning of the war. She did the image of them, but then she asked these people to share their images from their phones. And then she published together with the portrait of this person and the images from the phones what these people did. And this is like incredible because like each phone, it became as a storage for the archive. It became as a personal archive of the war images, but also it's a personal reflection on the war and like what you're going through it. And for example, from these images, like these first two, we can see the evacuated trains, and we can see like the stories from inside, because like the Angelica, like one of the heroes, she was there with her parents, and she did these images on her phone. And this is how we can get this inner vision, but also access to the stories from the phones of the different people who is going through this experience. And but also like if from one side it was the moment when not professional photographers, just like people who having the phones, they started to do the images because like it was important, like the fast reflection, but also like keeping this distance from what's going on. It's kind of also a way of the protection, but also like this way when you like see something, the first what can you do, just like make the video or images. But also what happened, the professional photographers, some of them, they stopped to do the images. And one of the reasons is that because a lot of professional male photographers joined the army. But another reason also like because like the professional photographers, when they used camera as a main tool to tell the stories, they lost belief that it's possible to tell the stories by the photo, but also they lost belief that it's possible to change something when you're doing the images. So, for example, Gera Artyomova, this is Kyiv-based photographer. So she has a small child, and from beginning of 2022, she just stopped to even make any images on her professional camera. She didn't make any projects. What she did, it's again like self-reflection by using her phone, but it was like more for herself, like capture the image of her son in the bathroom during the attacks, or the self-portrait together with the son, or just like view from her window. So like it was just personal diary of the war, which she never planned to show it, to publish it, and to make it public. But but she completely stepped out from her professional career as a photographer, because like for her, like first of all, the most important in this time, it's focus on her family and to protect the family and to protect her son, of course. So this is like was interesting how it was changed from the one position to another. And another chapter, it's also like about the transition of the age and gender. Because nowadays, I don't know if you know, but for example, for me, it's not a problem as a female to travel from Ukraine to US or somewhere outside of the country. I have the rights for this. But for male in the age between 18 and 60, it's forbidden. You can't leave Ukraine. You have to be in the country. And this is one thing which is influence, of course, the career and influence the work of a lot of professionals, male. From another side, it's also the question that a lot of photographers, male photographers, they joined the army, as I mentioned. And most of them who join in the active positions, they stop to make any images because like they just don't have time, the possibility, you're just soldiers now. And also because of this, so many females like started to do the war photography. And it's also quite interesting because like nowadays, like the main photographers or videographers who is working on the front line, it's mostly the photographers in the age 18, 25, super young. But maybe it's also the age when you're like brave enough and you're not so afraid. But also like it's also the question about the family. You don't have family yet, so like you can really take a risk. But also there's a lot of females who started to cover the war. And here like one of the example, Yulia Kochetova. So I really like this image because like this image was made 24th of February 2022 when she was in the Kramatorsk, it's east part of Ukraine, just sitting in her room in the hotel, and she did this selfie, which she didn't know, okay, what to do next. It just was the morning when the war escalated, and she's sitting alone in her room, and he completely lost, and he doesn't know where she travel, maybe where she should to go, like to make her images, and this is like lost. It was like exactly what's a lot of professionals, but people go through it like on the beginning. But anyway, she continued to work on the front line. She is covering the important stories, and she is trying to show also that the war is personal. And for example, in 2024, she did the project which called The War is Personal. She won the prize of the World Press Photo. But like what I really appreciate in her story is that like she's trying to show the connection between what she's showing, but also herself. Because like for her, this is like also traumatic experience, and also like the people whom she is covering us soldiers and a lot of our friends already killed. Talking about the age, Ivan Samoilov, young photographer, and what is important to say that like we got independence from Russia in 1991, so like when the Soviet Union were collapsed. And of course, like the new generation of the photographers, it's photographers who were born in after 1991, so they even didn't have this experience, like them, of Soviet Union. And of course, they never had the experience like to live like together with Russia. And of course, like this is already independent generation who are fighting and who are like really working for the future of their country. And Ivan Samoilov, young photographer, who actually he started like to make the images in the beginning of the escalation in 2022 in Kharkiv, which is like east part of Ukraine, dangerous district, under the attack most of the time. And he just did the simple images to cover how the city changed during the first months. But now he's working for the assignments. Now he's working for the different medias. And it's really interesting to see how the young photographers starting from 2022 and then like over like this 4 years, they came as a professional photographers who is like specialization is war. So it's so this story, The Silent Land, is also the recent story which he did in his district, in Kharkiv district, and this is about how the land in Ukraine is full of mines and the life of the civilians when it's like all the time take a risk when you're living next to the mines and you even don't know where they are, and the families and the people trying to gather together and by themselves to search for these mines, but also deactivated them. But this is another different story. Another example, Ruslana Kluchko, also young photographer, and she, like in her recent project, I wanted to show that also like the photographers trying to work on the important topics, but even like when they haven't access to it. Because like she is focusing on the fires on the north part of Ukraine, like it's not from Kiev, where she is from. And this fire started because of the active front line next to it. And of course, like some of these territories here don't have access, so she is using the different methods, a little bit artistical approach, to show this is how the ecological genocide is going on, like ecocide is going on, and also how it's influenced like all this circulation from the front line, from the war, which is influenced the nature, and we have like the crucial changes which is not visible from the first way, but like then it's have really long-term influence. And the last transition, it's a transition from the civilians to the military. As I mentioned, like a lot of photographers join army. But also we have to really understand that like the army in Ukraine, it's civilians. It's the people who were worked in the, made the coffee, like waiters, in the IT, in the poets, photographers, whatever. Like it's just like people who had their normal life before 2022, even before 2014, and they joined the army for the fights. And also it's different like compared with other countries, like if we're talking about the soldiers of the militaries. And that's why it's also interesting to observe how the photography is developed in this circle. So for example, Roman Zakrievsky, he is a professional photographer, but he joined the army and he's like press officer, so like he's making the images, but for himself he's always doing like using the film camera by the making like the images for personal reflection. And also what is important to say that like a lot of photographers who is now in the army, they're using film. And this is interesting moment, because I think the film is kind of materialization of memory, that like you are still using the film, that like you wanted like to really like to memorize, to have this physical object as a memory of your existing, but also the existing of your colleagues, and like the memorizing of these moments. But of course, like the topics which are covered now by the photographers in the front, it's a front life. So this is like the images, what is surrounding them. And Dmytro Kupryan, like one of the Kiev-based photographer who actually joined the army, like I think in 2015, but then he had a small break, and then like he back in 2022, and he's doing this like images, like it's film also, but like this like 3 images together, like triplets, to showing the surrounding of him, and to showing the really the inner situation. And this gives a little bit intimate even stories that we can see the situation where the photographers are living. We can see a little bit closer where they're staying, how their life is, what is routine is in the front line. And this is also like gives like this different access which you will never have if you're professional, from the professional photographers who is just coming for 1 or 2 weeks to making their stories. Because like this is the inner perspective you can have only from the person who is in the same conditions, living there and have time to do these images. But also a lot of soldiers started like to do the images by themselves for the create the kind of reflection on what they're doing, like on the reflection, something different, like what is like not relevant to your active war position. Sam Kurchava it's his pseudonym. This is the soldier. He's working as an operator of the drone, and here you can see 2 images. The first image is an image which made on the phone. It's an image of drone. The second image, it's an image from the drone, so it's a screenshot from the video, just a few seconds before drone target the goal. And the project called Premorte. So you can see it's almost like in the dynamic. You can see that like he's sending the drones with like the kind of the text on it, writing the text on it. It's almost like they send the message, and then like he's targeting the goal, like the targeting the. And this is like, so like it's also like the quite vision which we are not seeing in the news, and it's something what we are not seeing in the publications. It's something what we can see, what the soldier can see. We can see it from his eyes, and we can see what he is like going through it like day by day. But also this is the story which is like important because it's bring us closer to the front. And I would like to finalize by also what is changed. It's the vision of selfie. We are so often using selfie. Every day we are using selfie. We are making selfie with our friends. We are making selfie of us. And it became so normal. But that amount of the images which were increased in Ukraine in the front, it's incredible. So many soldiers making their selfie of themselves. And first of all, it's to send to the family, to send that to show I'm fine. But also it's to send, like to keep for themselves, because like the act of making selfie of yourself, it's kind of the show that I'm alive, I'm still alive, I'm still here. And also, like for example, like this is like the images of the phone of Maria Lesniak. She's young nurse, and she joined the army in 2022. And it's also, we can see this like the simple images of her life and her surrounding, but also the selfie of her. And what is interesting, these images, it was not made to be shown publicly. It was not made to be in the presentation or in the exhibition or in publication. It was made just for herself, for the private use, for the remembering like small things, for the remembering like her state in that time or in that space. So like small details which had to be only like protected, like as a tool of the protection. And another photographer or like soldier, he doesn't want to say his name, so he's anonymous photographer, but like he's not professional. You can see that he is also like working as a drone operator, and he's staying in the different houses, and in each house he is doing the portrait of himself in the mirror. And it's also quite interesting because like he's the same, like it's like different, like several layers. From one layer we can see the person and we can see how many selfies he is making. But from another we can see the surrounding, we can see the interior of these houses, which were like the people lived. There's like some things from the, I don't know, the toys for the kids. This is like the private things, and people have to flee, people have to run away because of the danger, and they have to move, and now this house is used by the soldiers. And this is also like so many layers which we can see this intimate story of the people who are fighting, but also like staying in these places, but also people who are like have to left their houses. So this is, this is the end. But like what is like, I just wanted like to say as a kind of the conclusion that like there's so dynamic situation in Ukraine nowadays. It's every month some changes are going on. And what is important that photography, it's so live. It's reacting on these changes. And photography is also the media which we are adapting, and we are using it not just only for the documentation, which is incredibly important, but also for the protection. Because like as I mentioned, like using the phone, using the photography, sometimes you're hiding, and this is a way to hide. Sometimes this is a way just to make yourself visible and alive, and to be sure, okay, I am here. But this has become so strong tool, and also this is another examples how the photography can be used by the telling the stories, especially that stories which will be never told by the media. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kateryna. I'd like to now turn to Arpi, who's going to tell us a little bit about an exhibition he curated in 2017 that was at the J. Paul Getty Museum called Breaking News, Turning the Lens on Mass Media.
Thank you so much. So about 10 years ago, I organized a show that looked at the ways that we understand the world around us, especially difficult images, especially images made during wartime, mediated through the news, and how artists have used various techniques to further kind of mediate our understanding of the events happening around us. Here's an installation view of Martha Rosler's Bringing the War Home, a project that she did in the 1970s, and looking at the images that were appearing in Life magazine about the Vietnam War. And she collaged together images of conflict with images of interior scenes, because in the same magazine, in Life magazine, both of them appeared often side by side. But Martha Rosler really kind of juxtaposed them within the same image itself. Here is a work by Sarah Charlesworth, also made in the 1970s, at the end of the 1970s. And this, she made a series of projects where she tracked the position of images on the front page of newspapers. This one specifically looked at the official newspaper of the Vatican, and it was during a sort of moment of crisis in Italy where the Red Brigade captured the Italian Prime Minister. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sitting next to an Italian here. And this was sort of a national tragedy, but in Vatican City, what you see is pictures of the Pope throughout the 30-plus days of this this kidnapping. If you wouldn't mind going to the next. And then here we have some vitrines, some cases where I put in several issues or editions of a book project that was done by Broomberg and Shanaran, a photo duo based out of London, called War Primer 2. And this is a project that they reimagined a 1955 publication by Bertolt Brecht, who published a photo book on the Second World War. And Broomberg and Chenerin sort of co-opted this publication and inserted images associated with the War on Terror. Images largely circulating online, but also in other publications, and sort of juxtaposed two very different depictions of different wars. Here we have a photograph by Donald Blumberg, who in the 1960s photographed the newspaper and was really interested in the way that again, images of conflict, difficult pictures were understood and were contextualized within the confines of a newspaper. And here's a close-up of the Broomberg and Chenerin. And maybe there's one more. Yeah. And so one of the things that the show was tried to get at was that, you know, images are slippery. They don't have a fixed meaning, and context is very important. And we want a lot from a photograph. You know, it's in our passport, but it's also, you know, immensely manipulable. And it has been since the beginning of the history of the medium. And so I think one of the things I find really interesting is the ways that artists sort of rethink, recontextualize, and question the veracity of a photograph and what it can do and what it can't do. And this is something that, you know, is continuing to change as we rely more and more on our phones and on the new ways that photographs continue to circulate. For much of the history of the medium, photographs had sort of very dependable modes of circulation, and now those are continuing to change.
Great. We'll come back to you in a moment, Arpad, when we open up the conversation between the four of us. For now, I'd like to just shift for a moment to Camilla, so folks know what Camilla has been working on, and with just a few images, and Camilla will give us a little bit of background of her project.
Hello. Just a few words to introduce myself. I, as Kathryn said, work in the Balkan Peninsula since 2009. And I have explored the region for years, sometimes alone, sometimes in collaboration with anthropologists and journalists. My practice is grounded basically on long-term engagement and mixing art with free appropriation of ethnographic methods. Speaking about my experience in post-war, I started to work in Bosnia-Herzegovina in 2009. Here are some images of my last project there. Bosnia lived a very bloody and terrible conflict in 1992, 1995, and the society is still shaped by these traumatic memories nowadays, and by the heritage of media coverage of this violence that occurred in that time. So as a to respond a little bit about what we said, I, as a stranger, have to deal with this, like many other photographers, to deal with this heritage of representation of violence nowadays, and with these stereotypical narratives that this coverage indirectly or directly created. So these are these images of reality now in this country, where I try to create non-iconic images on purpose, just to leave the landscape, speak about the history and what happened. Because iconic moments maybe are easily manipulated and speaks maybe sometimes too directly to the audience. So this is an image, simply house, and But this house has a story about past and future and present. It's a house that is built in a very traumatic place during the war that now is built but abandoned by people that doesn't want to live anymore there. So it's a meaning that is hidden inside the picture and going on the others. Also, this landscape is very beautiful, but also at the same time traumatic for the place that's linked to a genocide, and this in Srebrenica is also a political place that is manipulated today. And the next picture also is seems to be very simple, but it's representing young kids that go each year to the memorial for the commemoration of genocide, that have to work all the night to reach the memorial and pass the day there.
Thank you, Camilla. I think it's quite, so maybe now we'll just shift to having a conversation between us. And I think it's quite interesting, Camilla, to see what you're doing, because the images themselves almost seem banal or so peaceful. They don't necessarily evoke this history of what's occurred, but then when coupled with the text, it becomes clear that in fact they do speak of this long-standing history of conflict. And I think the way in which you're coupling images and text really reveals how photos can sort of contain within them so many meanings. And I think it's an interesting position to take in relation to what Kateryna was showing us today, and also in relation to the exhibition that you curated, Arpi, because almost pretty much all of the work we saw in Kateryna's presentation is about photographers working from the inside of the conflict. Everyone is deeply embedded in one position or another. And so the images that we're seeing are images that are quite unusual. They're images that when you're from the outside, they're not trickling out. And I think that taking that back or tying that back to your exhibition, Arpi, the images in the mass media that we saw were images largely taken from the outside, or the images being questioned in the exhibition, but the artists themselves are challenging these images. But interestingly, a lot of the artists you showed were actually still outside of the conflict. And so they were using forms of representation that were at times highly aestheticized, maybe more playful, or in a way, they had the luxury of looking in a particular way, unlike, say, the documentation that Kateryna was showing us that many of the photographers were being forced to resort to. So maybe we might talk for a moment about this inside-outside question.
Yeah, this is sort of a really interesting, line of thinking of like the inside versus the outside. I think most of us who are on the outside, of course, depend on the work that professional photographers who cover conflict provide, and they, provide a lot of essential information, knowledge for us to really understand, a conflict. But maybe people who are inside need something different. And I think some of the slides that you mentioned or you showed, where people are taking selfies to sort of just to show that they are alive, is a very different type of photograph than what would run on the front page of major newspapers. And I think there's room for both of those things. I think in the Breaking News exhibition, artists were reappropriating images that were circulating in mass media, and I think part of it was that those pictures were just not enough for them. They weren't providing either the full picture or they weren't providing satisfying information about the coverage. And so it was a way for artists to, try and figure out sort of more information or a way of dealing with the lacking in the coverage.
I am let's say I'm completely agree like that it's should be two sides of the images. It should be the images which are made by the from the inner perspective, like the people who see the situation differently and they know the context much more deep in the situation, but definitely it has to be the images which from the outside point of view, because like when you're coming to another country, maybe you can see it differently, critically, or maybe like even like to see something what the photographers can't see who is living because it's already so routine for them. But also like I would like to navigate this like to just bring these questions to the audience, just to think, because you're kind of the people who is seeing the images, you're seeing the news, and you're seeing what's going on in Ukraine from the news, or like you did, you had like some information from the news. And it was like mostly from the photographers from US or international photographers. And today I showed you the inner perspective, like how I see what's going on in Ukraine by the photographers, or not professionals, like what's going on in Ukraine. And it just like, I will propose that we'll all think, and also like that you think, like what is approach is much not important, two are important, but which one will catch your attention more, or in which story you will react more. Because like sometimes it works from the professional photographers, they make the images which can catch reader attention. But also I felt like during this like 4 years it doesn't work, because it's already too long and the war is already 10 years. And now I think it's also the time when the personal stories and the personal vision became much more important, because like the personal vision gives access to the information more deeper and maybe more understandable. Maybe I'm not right, but I just wanted that you will think about this.
I want to add, I think there are two important things to consider here as well, which is how sort of technology has shifted, and the popularization of the phone and everyone's access to Instagram and the way in which images get shared have really changed and changed quite a bit from this time period you're talking about, and even from the period of the Balkans. So that everyone has the ability now to represent this experience is quite different, and they also have a tool to disseminate these images in some ways. And I think it's a very interesting question as we move towards a reality of Palantir. So you have these photographers and we have their names present, but what does it mean to actually be taking these photographs? What's at stake, particularly as we move towards a more traceable identity and a highly technologized future? And the other question I was thinking about, well, let's just stop there. We'll come back to more soon.
I wanted just to say and to remark that to me it's very interesting to see how these personal stories add context, a deepest context to the reality of conflict, because there is another foreigner, us. All the people that doesn't live a conflict, that is not inside, that is a viewer, a spectator of this aggression, of this violence. And today is very difficult to empathize, really, to get informed, to take a personal engagement as a viewer. So we have also, as viewers, a task in a way to relate with those images more personal, maybe more silent, more slow, and take the time, dedicate the time to read those images and take the time to let them speak. because of course, an images of violence, of aggression, represented in a very spectacular way, catch at the first moment our attention. And an image silent, like a selfie or a photo of a simple table with cigarettes maybe, is not so catchy as a violent image, but at the same time is giving these little details I learned are very important for daily life and for our perception and comprehension what a conflict means to personal level and community level. So I think it's very important to give place to these details, to the little thing, to nuances, to gestures, because I think those kind of elements help to build a real empathizing relationship with people who is living violence.
I think you're bringing up something that was the second topic I wanted to bring up, which is this question of the attention economy we all function in, and how we're so maxed out by images in general, from the media, and maybe the media has different interests that we don't always understand, why this one shows these or why that one does or doesn't. On Instagram, TikTok, you can go any moment and just consume hours and hours of horrific representations. And to Kateryna's question about, well, which is more appealing to you and which has impact, I think it is a very important question, because is there even any impact in a way as we look at what's happening in Ukraine, Israel, the post-Bosnian war, like there's so many wars going on now and conflicts going on now. So how do we even afford space for thinking about this? But with that question in mind, I think what you're saying, Camilla, is quite important, which is seeing these kinds of images with these mundane details or even aspects of life that are pleasant, like we might go across town and there's a field of wildflowers or there's these cigarette butts. Like there is a way in which those details offer a more relatable experience than perhaps seeing a giant building being blown up. And I do think there is something about that enables, at least my experience is, to feel like, oh, this could be happening here too. This is something that I understand.
Just to add to that, I think, for better or for worse, we live in a sea of images. And I still really believe in the power of a photograph and what it can do. And I think a lot of people here are here because they maybe also believe in that as well. But empathy has become, a real scarce resource.
Camilla, maybe you can give your microphone to Arpy. His is not working that well.
Sorry, thank you.
Great.
Much better.
Maybe you could repeat that, Arpy. I'm not sure if everybody heard you.
What I said was that for better or for worse, we live in a sea of images, and I think we're all trying to figure out how to navigate the onslaught. And I still very much believe in the power and the magic of a photograph, but it's becoming more and more challenging to bring the same level of empathy to every single image that one encounters. And I think, as Kateryna, you said, this war in Ukraine is the most documented, the most well-documented conflict to date. And part of that is because of how long it's been going on, but also because of the different ways it's been documented. And you showed several examples in, absolutely horrific and heart-wrenching ways. But we don't all see all that. And I think there's, great reporting being done in conflict zones. There are, incredibly talented, trained professional photographers who risk their lives every single day. But we can't discount the personal, which is, I think, what is fantastic about your presentation. And I think what is so effective about your presentation is that you kind of draw out the personal. And I think ultimately, maybe that's what sticks to people. The trouble is that, you know, we're sort of a self-selected crowd who, you know, are willing to engage with it, whereas it's harder to kind of bring the same level of empathy from a larger kind of world unless you're willing to make this presentation 2,000 more times.
You recorded.
Great, excellent. But I often think, and this is not a fully formed idea, but that the same challenges that photographers have and us as arts professionals have in communicating the gravity of something like climate change is the same challenge we have in communicating the gravity and the terror of conflict. And both of those things kind of suffer from the same thing, is that they're, in many, many ways, they're very concrete, but in many ways they're quite abstract. And, you know, photographs can only do so much.
Thank you, Arpad. I'd like to open it up to the audience, but I have one last question for Kateryna before we do it, which is, you put to the audience the question of which kind of imagery they like more. These may be grand ones from the outside that represent the drama and the horror versus these sort of quieter, represented from the inside pictures that maybe show daily life, the banality, and so forth. And I'd like to ask which images speak to you, because clearly you have made this presentation with a very particular focus that's quite unusual. I mean, for me, I've never seen anything like this and was very moved. So,
Well, I will avoid the word like, because to be honest,
yeah, poor word choice on my part.
like, to be honest, if I'll have a chance to choose, I will never work with the war photography. And I will never want it to help to the photographers who is working on the front line. But this is like the situation. And talking about my selection, for me, what was really important is to show this inner perspective, what's like how I see it from the inside. And also, like, for me, it's important when I'm working with a photography as a curator. Like, I am working with the professional photographers, of course, but also, like, for me, it's so important to involve the voices from not professional, who is just using the media photography, from young photographers who is like 18, 16 years old, from the soldiers, from the different perspective, because I believe when we have all these voices, only then we can see what's going on. If we have only one voice, then it just will be manipulated by this voice, will be limited by the information. And I also would like to add, like, it's like, you're like absolutely right, this is like not possible to really like to see like everything what's going on in the world. And the same, like, I think we are asking too much from the photography. We are asking that photography will make the changes. But first of all, what I think, we have to be active as an audience, not just wait that image will make changes for us, but like to be that active, that to try to, first of all, to collect all these voices, to analyze all these voices, and just by ourselves to understand what's going on. Because no any photographers will bring us to information, no curators, no any institutions. Like, in only each of us are responsible what we know from the world, or like from the different countries, or like from what's going on, and it's our choice, I think. And so that's, I just like to try to show a little bit small piece. And before we'll move to the questions, because I forgot, it just like if you just wanted to know more about Ukrainian photography, and if you wanted to support Ukrainian photographers who is working on the front line, or for example who already were injured, like, we did the publications which called the Information Front. This is like the 2 volumes. I just brought, like, for the seeing them, like, to the, because it's quite heavy to bring from Ukraine, but it's possible to order online. And if you'll be interested, I'll just like come to me, and then I'll tell you how to do it.
And you can also come up here and flip through these after the talk. So thank you so much, Kateryna. So at this point, we'd like to open it up. If anybody has questions, please feel free. Yeah, let me do this. Okay.
Kateryna, thank you for being courageous. Most Americans see pictures of damaged apartment houses, sometimes fire, sometimes holes in the ground. That's 98%, maybe 99% of all that's really shown. And I'm wondering what you think about that, because you talk, I have two thoughts. One is about having heard you speak about propaganda, and, three questions. The second is, what happened between the Great War, World War I and World War II, in terms of what happened to artists, in terms of their expressions of the horror of war. Looking at the future, I have questions. Maybe there are too many questions here. I apologize. And the third issue is, we're sitting right on the edge here, tonight, about whether we're going to have surgical bombing of Iran with, images of holes in the ground and whatever else, but very little else. What do you think of that in terms of, you asked us questions, so I want to be fair and ask you a question too. What do you think of the representation around the world, well, the U.S., in the U.S., of this? And anyway.
Yeah, thank you. I will answer from my perspective because, first of all, I'm not really familiar what you can see here in US. But when we started to distribute the images and to show images from Ukraine from 2022 till now, let's say every 3 months we change our strategy. Because if on the beginning it was important to show the destroyed houses, for example, now I don't believe that it's important because it doesn't work. When you see so many destroyed houses, you see the houses from Gaza, you see from Ukraine, you see from the other countries. Sometimes even you don't see the difference. It's not ours. So you don't see the difference. Why is it? You don't really recognize what the country is. It's it's not familiar for you. It's just the images which are scrolling and you don't pay attention anymore. And even when we are living in Ukraine, I mean, of course we know all the what's going on around, and but still, to see on the images of destroyed houses, it doesn't work anymore. So what is important? It's each I don't know, several months to really understand how to tell the story and to adapt for this, because as the changes come super fast in Ukraine, the same it's about adaptation, how to tell the stories, that to share them, that they still will be relevant, that they still will show what's exactly now is important, and that they will be talking to the audience. Otherwise, I think it's quite often it's the same techniques using by the media that it's not updated by the time, and that's why I think it doesn't work. And talking about the next questions, it's quite political, to be honest. So I think it's for the maybe more smaller circle to discuss. But what I really believe that it's really important to have the photography or video coverage of everything what's going on, just to have access to understand the I mean, as I mentioned, we need to collect different voices to understand what's going on. Really, to have the voices from the inside of Iran, but also from outside, but also just to really understand. Otherwise, if we'll have only one way of receiving the information, it doesn't work. And of course, in each conflict, there's propaganda. And in US, it's also propaganda. Propaganda is everywhere, but just what is important to learn how to read it and to understand.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Kateryna. Thank you for that presentation. It might be a little off topic. I'm just curious. Two-part question. Are you hopeful? After all this, are you hopeful? Do you still have, faith in a victory? And secondly, what do you think it'll take to end this war?
I think the war will be long. and the peace will not come in the common years. And then depend what will stay and who will survive. We will see what the future will be, but it definitely will be the future of free, independent country, Ukraine, with a young generation who will rebuild it.
Well, I apologize. This is more of an observation than an actual question, but I think that the panel today was very interesting because you approached this idea of war and trauma from a variety of perspectives, and I think that that is really the answer to the questions that have really been posed throughout this whole afternoon, because you can't really, I don't think it's, you know, first off, you have to start with the idea that it's not really possible to completely understand trauma. So you have to start from that perspective. But the way that the things that you showed today and the Camilla afterwards in Sarajevo, it's the absence that actually informs what we are trying to fill in. And in the case of Arpy's exhibition, he's using, or the artists are actually trying to create ways of opening things so that we can actually understand it better, or that we can take these ideas of propaganda and break them down so that we refine our ability to actually see. And so the question that you actually pose is, what do you like better? Prompted me to just say, I think it's a complete process that helps us. And I just thank you all for a really interesting and informed presentation.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much. I want to get to this issue of the dilemma of modern photography regarding the ubiquity of images and how it floods our world. One thing that, especially with Kateryna, your presentation made me think about was that because technology is so good right now, we have more better photographers than at any time in human history. But maybe they're not better photographers, maybe they're just more attentive eyes. That maybe what's happened in the last couple of decades is people's senses of vision about what to stop and frame has become better because of the technology. I'm just curious as to anyone has any ideas or thoughts about that. Have we become better seers in spite of all the bullshit?
As I'm Italian, I have a little I didn't understand the last part of the question. Can you please repeat it?
Yeah, just because of the images that we were looking at, they were so personal from so many people who were not photographers. The technology creates people to be photographers, even though they don't think of themselves as photographers. And maybe what's allowing to happen is our sense of an important moment has become more focused.
Well, I noticed, for example, a huge difference between my experience relating to war in Bosnia and her research in Ukraine. In Bosnia, people didn't have any cell phone, for example. So really, the coverage depended on professional or people that from the main media. I remember the emotion to be in a dinner with an old man that have been on the front after many years of work in Bosnia, and finally have access to his personal photo album of the front line, which was very rare to find at the time, because people didn't have at the time the means to even take a selfie of himself. I mean, just a Bosnian photographer has this skill, and find a camera then was impossible. So this is, of course, the first remarkable difference about the technology and access to take picture today. And at the same time, I think, in general, this facility of producing pictures is generating, let's say, in my opinion, a change of paradigm for contemporary photographers that have to deal with images, because I think it's just not about taking a picture today. Is about the story you are telling with all the nuances you can find and can you express. So it's not just one picture, it's maybe the group of picture and the relation between those images and reality, and the relationship you can create with the meanings and what you want to say and how deep you go. So this is a new challenge, of course, in this time. I don't know if I answered.
I think in the interest of time, to be respectful to our audience, we probably need to stop here. But if any of you would like to keep chatting with Kateryna, Arpad, or Camilla, we'll be around for a moment more. So please feel free to come up and speak with them. Thank you for coming.